What's up, YouTube? My name is Alexis, and today I'll be discussing things that frustrate me about iOS as an Android user. As you can tell, this is quite different from my usual setup. However, I kind of just wanted to make a quick video and just discuss some of my thoughts that I've had while using iOS in the past couple of months. I'm still using my Galaxy Z Fold 5 as my daily driver. However, I've also been using my iPhone 15 Pro Max with iOS 18 for work for the past 3 months or so. After using iOS daily for the past couple of months, I wanted to go over a couple of things that I find frustrating about iOS coming from Android. First is the file management on iOS. I don't find it to be as seamless as it is on Android. So you can still get the basic functionality as far as saving files, moving files around into different folders, copying files, things like that. However, I don't like the general user experience of the Files app on the iPhone. The menu options that show up generally feel less user-friendly and more confusing when compared to Android. It's not always clear where to tap on the screen to get the options that you're looking for. Another aspect about file management is connecting your iPhone to a computer. I generally don't find it to be as straightforward as connecting an Android device to a computer and transferring files back and forth. This sort of brings me to another aspect of iOS and the iPhone, which is iCloud. I don't like how it seems like everything wants to default to iCloud. I get that iCloud can be a useful feature, especially if you pay for more storage. However, I personally don't, and I tend to just use physical backups and manually transfer files. If I really have to store something in the cloud, I usually just go with like Google Drive, which makes it easier to work across many different devices, regardless of what platform I'm using. I find myself having to manually opt out of iCloud, which I feel like it would make more sense for me to want to opt in. Also, I find myself having to double check and make sure that I saved on the iPhone's local storage rather than on iCloud. I can see how iCloud could be easier to use, especially if you use only Apple devices. However, I don't, so it's not really the best fit in my workflow. Another thing I find frustrating about the iOS experience on the iPhone is the lack of split screen functionality. While iOS apps generally work great on the iPhone, you can only really look at one app at a time. There's no real way to look at two apps at the same time if you wanted to multitask. There are certain apps that can offer a picture-in-picture window, like YouTube. However, not every app is going to have that option. And in reality, I think it would be a better experience if you were able to split screen apps or even make like a pop-up window. However, that's not really an option that's available on iOS. This can get kind of annoying, especially if you're trying to look at two apps at the same time and you need to like cross-reference things. So you have to constantly be switching back and forth between different apps, and you can only really look at one app at a time. So especially if you are cross-referencing things or you wanted to look at multiple things at once, it just makes things more tedious and makes it take much longer than it should. This brings me to another point, which is the clipboard on iOS. I've been using my iPhone for work, and there's times where I need to copy text and paste it into a note or a text message. However, there's no like built-in clipboard management system on iOS, so you can only really copy one thing at a time. And even then, when you copy something, you can't even see what you copied until you pasted it. So there's no like clipboard history. There's no way to like save things that you copy by default on iOS. On Android, I can easily copy multiple things at once, and the clipboard is going to save your history and you can see all the things that you've copied. Especially if I need to copy multiple lines of text or multiple things. It's so much easier on Android having that clipboard, and it shows you the history and you're able to refer back to anything that you've copied previously, and you can easily delete things or reuse copied text, things like that. However, it's not really something that you can do on the iPhone by default. Another thing that I find frustrating about iOS is the lack of customization features. It's no surprise that this one's on the list, since obviously one of the main selling points of Android is going to be that it's super customizable. And just the general lack of customizability options on the iPhone can make it feel just so much more restricted. While it definitely has gotten a lot better on iOS as far as the new programmable action button, the new control center, the customizable app icons, and more lock screen options, it still feels miles behind what's available to you on Android. For example, one big thing for me is being able to resize the app grid. Whether you use a smaller iPhone or a larger iPhone, the app grid is always going to be locked to 4:6. So this limits the number of apps that you can have on one screen without having to make folders for multiple apps. And by that same logic, if you like to use widgets, which I do, there's only so many widgets and so many apps that you can fit onto one screen, which makes you have to create multiple pages. And while we're on the topic of widgets, they generally work really well. However, they can feel kind of boring sometimes because they're limited to very specific shapes, which makes the widgets feel less unique. Also, you can't use your home screen in landscape mode, which just reduces the functionality, especially if you're trying to use the device in landscape mode. Another one of the most frustrating things about iOS coming from Android is just the lack of a dedicated back button. There's no universal way to go back on the iPhone. Sometimes you swipe right from the edge, or you can swipe on the navigation bar, or sometimes you swipe up or down, or sometimes you even have to click a physical exit button or a close button, which in my opinion is just so much more of a seamless experience on Android because no matter where you are, there's always going to be a universal way to go back. So no matter where you tap on the screen, you can always click that universal back button and it'll just take you back to your previous screen. Finally, I did kind of just want to bring up the general lack of innovation on iOS, which is kind of disappointing. I hadn't daily driven an iPhone since the iPhone XR, which released alongside their flagship iPhone 11 back around October 2018, and they both shipped with iOS 12. So even now, 4 or 5 years later, the iPhone 15 Pro Max on iOS 18 doesn't really feel all that much different. While it definitely has improved a lot, and there's a lot of things that kind of pushed me over to Android, which are now available on the iPhone. However, there's still those little quality of life things that they just still haven't been implemented yet on the iPhone. There's definitely still some features that work better on the iPhone when compared to Android. However, this video is mostly just discussing some of my frustrations that I have with iOS after using Android for the past couple years. Of course, everyone's going to have their preferences and tools that work better in their workflow. However, these are just some of the thoughts that I've been having as I've been using both iPhone and Android on a daily basis. In any case, I would definitely like to hear your thoughts. What do you agree on? What do you disagree on? Feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a dislike if you didn't, and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.